Welcome team to Testing 123 with your host, me, Sydney. This week I've got the amazing Sophia Carey on. Oh God, I've already done it. She is a freelance full-time photographer. I found her content on TikTok and I just love her work. I cannot shout about her enough. So thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Did you have a good travel down?
Yeah, it was good. It was easy. I had a little nap and it all was good.
That is the best part about getting a train.
It is, yeah.
Driving you can't
have a nap. No, please don't.
So the reason I asked you to come on this podcast today is one, you're incredibly talented and you are doing so much at your age in not just the music industry. I have seen a lot of your work like commercially and stuff like that. And I just wanted to have a chat with you about how you got here, any words of wisdom you have for us and stuff like that. So thank you for sitting down with me.
No, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for asking me.
So can we just start off with how, like your early years, when you were at school, did you want to do this? Did you know you wanted to be creative? Like what kind of job did you see yourself at now and does it line up?
I always knew that I wanted a creative job. Maybe not specifically photography, but I always had that kind of trajectory of wanting to be in the arts. When I was like really little, I wanted to be like an illustrator. Then I wanted to be a writer. Then I wanted to be a graphic designer. That's what I went to uni for. And I kind of just fell into photography like along the way, quite organically. Didn't really think I was going to be a photographer. Just thought it was kind of like something I did. And then I just decided I enjoyed it more than all the rest of it. And it kind of just happened quite organically. It wasn't like meant to be. But yeah, I think it was always going to be like a creative thing. And my head was never elsewhere, like in terms of, I was not like good at maths or science or like anything like that. I was never going to be like a doctor. No, not me.
I think if you don't have that pull to
Yeah.
like be a doctor, my friends are doctors and I'm like, good for you. Like,
honestly, we need doctors.
We
You just
do.
don't need me as a doctor.
You don't need me as a doctor either. Can you talk to me about how, so you said that you kind of just found photography on the way.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to me a little bit about how you got your first job? Like, it doesn't have to be paid. We all know that very rarely is your first job paid. Like, what was your first like stepping stone?
Yeah, so with photography, the way I kind of got into it was because I did study graphic design. So I studied graphic design at college and then I went on to do it at uni. Whilst I was studying it at college, I did a lot of work that would incorporate photography. So it would be, whether it's like as a texture or print design that was like focused around photography. And I just kind of was like getting tired of like searching for like free stock imagery and like, because I couldn't afford to like pay for stock imagery. So I was like, I'll just take photos of doors myself and use like, so that's kind of like really what got me into photography. It was just like taking photos to use within graphic design. And then I grew up in Croydon around the time that like grime was having a resurgence. So I'm talking like, this was like maybe 2015 kind of time. And if you were growing up in Croydon at that time, then pretty much everyone you knew wanted to be a rapper. So it was very easy to like go to events. Like there was a lot of music events going on, like small venues around South London, that I would go to and I'd just take my camera and shoot like behind the scenes and like portraits of my friends and stuff. And it kind of just started going from there. I would just meet people like at events and then they'd say like, oh, do you do like press shots or I have a clothing brand and stuff like that. And I'd be like, yeah, okay, like why not? Just give it a go. And it just kind of went from there really. Very organic.
I think I personally found your content on TikTok and you were reviewing a camera. But when I saw your work, the first images I saw were like in the grime genre. And I remember being like, like that. I haven't seen anyone shoot it like that. And it really like immersed me in it. So it's cool that that's how you started.
Yeah. No, it's like a big part of my starting point. And I still am lucky enough to work with a lot of artists within that scene. And it's very, it's kind of instrumental in my career, but important to me in that sense as well.
Can you talk to me about your first paid job?
Yeah, I remember my first paid job because I didn't even know it was paid. I did the job. I didn't know that at this point that you could like...
That's amazing.
...kind of get paid. And it was, like I said, like, so someone I had met... I don't even know if I'd met them through an event or if they'd found me from Instagram from an event or something like that. And they were like, oh, I've got a clothing brand, like, do you want to take some photos for it? And I was like, yeah, cool. So I went and I took my friend, because my mum wouldn't let me go to shoots on my own, because I was like 16.
Yes, mum.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I took my friend, and I did the shoot, and then the client at the end gave me like just like a handful of like notes and coins, like from their, literally, it was like maybe like £34, like something really random. They just were like, oh yeah, have this. And I was like, cool, thanks.
Money's money.
Yeah, it was like, that was my first experience of like being paid, and it like was, I didn't decide on a rate. I didn't even know I was going to be paid. I just kind of was like, oh, thank you. Like, cool. Kind of went from there.
Just leading on from there, when was the first time that you were like, oh, I'm a photographer? Like, was there a moment, or was it just so gradual, or were you like, because I personally know that I've taken a while to, like, when people are like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I take pictures. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was, so the summer before I went to uni, I would probably say that was when I first really was finding my feet in the world of photography. It's I started doing weddings that summer. I was 17, and yeah, crazy. If I had known what it entailed, I probably wouldn't have done it.
I don't do weddings now. Like, people literally come to me and I'm like,
yeah,
I will add a 0 to my normal rate, sometimes 2,
yeah,
so that they go away, because I'm like, I don't want to do a wedding.
I like just didn't know what, like, how much work it was, so I just was like, yeah, like went into it head first, and I think that was the best way to do it, because I think I would have taught myself out of it otherwise. But I was doing weddings. I remember being at a party and like saying like, oh, I booked a wedding, and someone was like, oh, you're going to be a wedding photographer. And at this point I was about to start uni for graphic design, and I was like, no, I'm not going to be a photographer. Like, I'm not a photographer, I'm a graphic designer. Like, I was still very much in that mindset. But it was also the first summer that I got my first commercial job, and it was with Voxy for Vodafone. So they had just launched. They were hiring a team of 18 to 24-year-olds, because that was who the brand was aimed at. I was 18. And they booked me for that. And it was like a 6 months of like briefs that we did. And I shot like their opening event and stuff like that. And that was my first kind of introduction to the commercial world, like licensing, actually being paid like a proper fee, like all the things that kind of come into it, being briefed. Like, we had mentors. It was a really good like experience to like first step into the industry, I guess.
I didn't ask you, and I really should have. How long have you been doing this for?
So I started, it gets a little bit blurry because I don't know where like the first definitive job was, but I would probably say I was about 16, maybe 17 when I started.
Insane.
Yeah, like I think I probably was taking photos at 16, but maybe my first job was like just 10, 17, that kind of time. Yeah.
How old are you now?
I'm 25.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, that's basically a decade.
Yeah, I know, it's really scary when people ask me, and I think, and then like I calculate it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's quite a long time.
So when I said you're amazing and so great, like, do you kind of get where I'm at?
No, not at all, because I just think like I don't think you ever feel like you're. Because I think as well, like the thing with this industry is like there's so many amazing photographers, and as you grow, you end up working with photographers who are better at each stage as well. So you never feel as though like you're matching up to your peers or like your inspiration or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
No, I 100% agree with you. I definitely know what you're saying, but that is why I'm here to give you your flowers, because you deserve it.
Thank you.
That's so interesting, hearing about how you got started. And what about your film photography? Because you are quite well known for your film photography. You inspired me to do film photography. And as Film Stave in Southampton can attest, I'm not very good at it. They're like, sorry, Sydney, you have sent back another blank film. I'm like, brilliant, this is great. So please tell me a little bit more of that.
Yeah. So film photography is something that it actually took me a long time to get into it. So I had shot film kind of sporadically, kind of growing up from like as soon as I started photography. I got given like a Canon EOS 500, which is like it's like an SLR, but it's very cheap. It's like plasticky, and you can use Canon lenses on it. And I used to shoot Canon, so it was great because I could use like the same lenses, and you can pick them up, or you could pick them up for like 10 quid at the time. So it was like a nice starting camera. And honestly, I just didn't fall in love with it because it felt very much like shooting digitally, because the camera's very similar, the lenses are similar, and I just didn't really see, I guess, the point in shooting film at that point, because it felt like digital, but it was more expensive and it was harder.
Yeah, definitely.
So I was like, I kind of had a disconnect. But I really loved the work of photographers like Vicky Grout and Rosie Matheson, who shot on film. And I knew that Rosie Matheson shot on a Mamiya RZ67. So in 2019-ish, I think it was about then, like just before the pandemic, I bought an RB67 and just like went straight in, like had no idea what I was doing, messed up so many rolls, shot like 1,000 double exposures by accident, like would forget to rotate the back and shoot landscape but compose it for portrait. Like I just messed up. Like I really struggled to get into it. And that is kind of when I started documenting like film photography on my YouTube channel as well. And through that I kind of just learned more and like experimented more and just grew to kind of love the medium and everything that it kind of entailed and like how connected you were to the process. And from there I've just kind of loved film photography, and now I probably love it more than digital photography. So
yeah, because it's something definitely I've noticed with your work, and another photographer, Alex Grace Jones, the way that you both have interjected, is that the right word? I'm gonna go with that. Using digital and film together when you shoot campaigns or press and stuff like that. And I just love that, because I do not care what anyone says, there's not an editing software that can mimic film. There just isn't, because I think the way you shoot it and looking back on your YouTube videos, that skill just teaches you such a higher level of composition, because you can't take it out at the other end. Yeah, you can scan in a film photo, but it's not the same, is it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it taught me about slowing down and just kind of thinking about being more intentional with what I was shooting. And I learned, I would always say that I'm not, even to this day, I would say I'm not a very technical photographer, but it definitely taught me a lot more about photography and the technical side. Like now, like I'll print my photos in the darkroom and stuff like that. Like those sorts of things I never thought were really me. Like I said earlier, like I'm not naturally good at things like science and math. So thinking about like chemicals and mixing things, that's just not something that like my mind would ordinarily take to. So yeah, kind of going down that route and like learning more and exploring more has definitely made me more connected to kind of like the medium of photography in general as like a whole process, I guess.
Yeah, I think I definitely have, I can only speak from my experience. Definitely when I go to show or when I do stuff, I'm like, I'll just take 1 billion photos. And then you're like, have I actually learned anything there? Have I actually done anything? And this whole idea of slowing down, I think, is very important. And I do think it would create better work for everyone if they did do that. And I think film forces you to do that.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to waste money.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. And yeah, there's just something about shooting film and like the connection to the process. And I think also like not just slowing down, but like thinking about the whole process. So I'll go into a shoot, especially more like portrait or campaign shoots, and I'll think like, I want to shoot this on film because I want to print it in the darkroom. Like I'm thinking about the final outcome and how that kind of is looking before I'm shooting the images, which I don't do with digital. It's not the same kind of process I have in my mind. With digital, I kind of shoot and then I'm just like, oh, what kind of works from here? Whereas with film, I kind of have more of an idea in my head as to how I want the final image to look or the final piece to be.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. I want to move on to talking a little bit about my experience, because I like to talk about myself, and how I found you on TikTok. So I found you, and it was a video that, this is why I love TikTok, that you'd actually posted ages before, but it had come up on my For You page about the Polaroid camera.
Okay, yeah.
And I sat there and I scrolled through every single one of your videos until I got to like the embarrassing ones that no one wanted to see when you first started posting. And then I did the same with your YouTube as well. I've personally learned so much from both of those channels. And then being able to have a little bit of back and forth with you on Instagram, which I greatly appreciate. If I've ever needed help with something, or if just to have a community has been great. So I really appreciate that. But how do you think having a social media presence has helped your work?
Yeah, in so many ways. I think there's kind of like a twofold approach to this. In one sense, visibility has massively improved. As I grew on YouTube, it affected my Instagram. It, people found me. I've booked jobs through YouTube. especially in terms of campaign stuff, like the Polaroid job. I did like a campaign for Leica that I just wouldn't have booked if I hadn't done YouTube. So in that sense, it's definitely had like a direct correlation to my work. But on the other hand, also having that community and kind of exploring and sharing your mistakes and learning from the community that's around your work has also been really instrumental in my learning process, because I never learned photography through like a school or a uni, or I've never studied it. So I'm completely self-taught, and it's like having that community to kind of help you when things go wrong, or like offer you advice, or just kind of grow with you, I think has also been very instrumental in terms of like where my photography is at now.
Mm-hmm. Because there's like, this is debate, isn't there, which there always is online, of like being a photographer, a videographer, or a creative as a whole, and having things on a channel to help others. So like I personally look at your YouTube, Instagram and TikTok as a platform that highlights and showcases your work, but also is like a helping hand to others in the community. And there's always this argument, well, if you're just showing you're helping other photographers, an artist isn't going to want to work with you, or blah, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's quite refreshing to hear someone say, actually, no, it's been instrumental in X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there is one, in a way, I do kind of keep my Instagram quite separate to my TikTok and my YouTube content for that reason of treating it more like a portfolio. There is some sort of crossover, but it's not, I don't use it as like I kind of separate it into like me as a content creator and me as a photographer. They're like two different facets of my practice. And Instagram for me is more me being a photographer. YouTube is more me being a content creator, I guess. And same with TikTok. So yeah, I guess I do have a little bit of that separation because of what you're talking about. But generally, I don't think it puts people off. It's just one of those things, isn't it? I don't actually think that, at least in the UK, I don't actually know that many photographers that are content creators. So I'm not sure if that does kind of have an effect on people's work. I'm not really sure. You just got to find your own little corner of whatever you're doing, I think. And it's whatever that is and however that looks, as long as you're kind of happy with it, it doesn't really matter what other people think, really. Yeah. I kind of forget that people actually watch my YouTube. Like I always say this, like when I've had it like in instances where I've like met people and they've known me from YouTube, and it like shocks me so much, because I'm like, what do you mean? Like you actually watch it? Like there's actual people on the other side of the screen. Like
it's not just me.
Yeah, because I just film it in my living room. Like I'm just me and my camera, like talking to my camera. So it's very weird that people actually watch it.
So when did you move to Manchester?
I moved to Manchester in 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you found, did it help? Did it I feel like everyone says to be a music photographer, that's specifically what this podcast is about, but we'll talk about your other work as well. But to be like a commercial photographer, you really should be living in London.
Yeah, no, I don't agree at all. I mean, I do have kind of I guess I do come from like a privileged situation in the sense that my family still live in London. I'm from London. I have a network here. I can come home. I can work here. So I'm not 100% based in Manchester, so there is a little bit of like a discrepancy there. But Manchester's a great city for music photography. There's so much going on. Like, yeah, I mean, it's great. The north in general, and because the north is so narrow, like you could get from like one side to the other in the same time that you can get from like one side of London to the other side. I've
been to Manchester, I have a friend who lives up there, and when I go up, I'm like, actually, it would be so much easier, I personally think, because you have the mixture of like small intimate venues to you have the stadium, and also they're not pain in the asses to get to.
Yeah, because it's a small city. Yeah, absolutely. And like you can work in Liverpool, you can work in Sheffield, you can work in Leeds. It's very like easy to get across. Well, I mean, public transport's bad, but I mean, other than that, like everything's pretty near.
Something I do want to touch on quickly is you shot Olivia Dean back in May time.
Yeah, probably around that time.
Yeah. And that was, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the first time you shot for press.
Yes, yeah.
And you've been doing this for nearly 10 years.
Yeah. So basically this year I decided that I wanted to shoot more, I guess, mainstream acts, but I don't have a particularly large portfolio in shooting like pop artists and stuff like that. So I thought the best way to do that is to reach out to press and go that way, which is why I ended up shooting Olivia Dean for Howl magazine, which was my first time shooting press, which is, I know people don't usually do it in that order. I think I just kind of been lucky that like my journey's kind of like taken me quite organically through music photography. And yeah, like obviously I do have a portfolio with some mainstream artists in it. Like I've worked for like BST at Hyde Park and All Points East that have like those bigger mainstream artists, Parklife, other festivals like that. But yeah, I just thought it would be a good like experience to know what I was going into if I was to get like an opportunity that could only be through press or something like that, if that made sense. So I wanted to like just start kind of experiencing what it was like so that I didn't like end up at like a stadium with press and not know the process, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think I feel like I'm a press trooper. I feel like I have been through the ringer with press. Which press, I think press gets a bad rep. But yeah, it is a slightly different ballgame. I was going to say, how did you feel being like, I only have 3 songs to shoot?
Yeah, I mean, it is very weird because you, like I said, like my journey in music photography has been very different. So, I mean, there are instances where I've had only 3 songs in situations where like they're really big acts and they have certain restrictions. But generally, I'm really like spoiled. I'm used to having like all access. I'm used to going where I want to go, shooting what I want to shoot. So yeah, having those restrictions is something, like I said, I just wanted to like get used to it, I guess. I don't want to like only be able to shoot. I think as well, like that's the thing, like it's easier to shoot when you have all access and you can shoot for the whole show, right? Yes. So challenging yourself to like actually shoot from just the pit for first 3 songs is harder than when you have like all access and everything like that.
Yeah, I was doing press so much, my photos looked not the same, because I think no matter who you shoot, they always look different, don't get me wrong. So I would always really push myself to be like, oh, can I shoot from the crowd? Mm-hmm. Like, if you can't go backstage, that is something that I always am very quick to be like, hey, am I allowed to shoot from the crowd? 9 times out of 10, they're like, we don't care. Just go away. And I'm like, okay, bye. So yeah, no, I do understand. And like, good for you for pushing yourself.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of experience it. And yeah, and then if there were like things in the future that I wanted to shoot and the only way to shoot that was through press, then I'm not kind of like completely going into it blind to what that process entails.
Yeah, because there are like, I think we're all amazing and I think we're all great. But there are some people that we will only ever get to shoot as press.
Absolutely.
Or from a barrier, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So can we just talk a little bit about like career defining moments? Do you have any that come to the top of your head where you're like, I've made it? I mean, I don't think we, like at the time you felt it was like, or...
Oh, do you know what? I always find this really strange because I've been lucky enough to have a lot of opportunities where I've thought that this is going to change my career and I've shot it, and then you kind of have this feeling afterwards where you're like, nothing's changed, and you almost expect it to. And then you have that realization of like, oh, now what? And I feel like I've had more of those in my life than I have had opportunities that have actually changed my career.
I'm really happy you brought that up. Like, I really am.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone thinks they're going to shoot, they're going to take that shot.
Yeah.
And that's it. No one's ever going to, like, you're going to be fully booked for the rest of your life. You're going to go on a million tours. Mm-hmm. Everyone's going to want you. And I very similarly, I'm like, this is it. Like, this is it. And then I've done it and I'm like, oh, I got 4 likes on Instagram. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And the artist didn't even tag me in it. Brilliant.
Exactly that. Yeah. I think I've had a lot more of those situations in my life where like I've come away from big opportunities actually feeling quite deflated because of that expectation that you do put on those opportunities. And I also think that I'm very good at like almost like you put that pressure on yourself and then you don't make the best work that you know you can make. And then that's disappointing as well because you think you've come away from it thinking I could have done better, but I put the pressure on myself and now I haven't done as good a job as I had anticipated I would, or I know I can.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind me sharing a bit of my personal experience. So I had a agent reach out to me and was like, hey, we're in your area. Can you come and shoot the show? And I was like, well, funny, Ross, actually, the PR have already sent me a press pass because I was like down the road. I was like, I already wanted to do it. And then he was like, okay, cool. I'll get back to you because we'd like you to shoot the lads properly. And I was like, okay, cool. Didn't hear anything of it. Like, I was like, I'm going to go my press pass. Like I already had it set up anyway. And then I felt so much pressure because that manager and PR the day before the show followed me on Instagram. And I was like, and then the PR messaged me and were like, hey, like, we don't have it in the budget this time, but I did speak to the manager. Like, we still want you to shoot, but can you just do first 3? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. They're like, can you send us a link to a Google document a couple of days later? And I was like, yeah, cool. And this is what's very important, people. You sort out licensing and say just for social media use only, and they have to be tagged. And then I got so much pressure on myself. And I was like, I took these photos and I thought they were okay. Like, they weren't my best work. And they hated them. And like,
oh really?
They were like, it's a really, really tough to shoot in small venues with the lighting so bad. And I was like, oh, that's a nice way of being like, you do not want to use these. They liked the stuff I'd made, like content creator wise.
Yeah.
And they were like, we definitely would have you back as a content creator. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm not deflated at all.
Oh, but things like that, it's like, everything's so subjective, isn't it? Yeah. And I think as well, you also have to remember that like when you take photos of people, they have their own insecurities as well. So it might not actually even be your photo. It could be just like the way they felt about themselves on that day.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think we all build up these opportunities so much in our head when actually in reality, you're going to wake up the following day and be exactly who you were before, just with a little bit more experience.
Absolutely. I mean, I can think of so many jobs where I've really like gone into it so excited, and then you do the job and there is like this, it's almost like, you know, when you have like a really cool experience, like you go on holiday or you go to a concert and then you just feel a bit shit afterwards. Like you just feel a bit like,
or in my dramatic sense, my life is over.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? Like it's just that kind of like deflation of like, you've had like a really good experience and now it's like, oh, it's over. I've felt like that so many times in my career where I've had like a job that I've been really excited for, and then it's just like, the realization of that nothing's changed. You still got to work really, really hard, and like you still got to like do everything on no sleep, and you're still like no further on. Is quite humbling.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's kind of what keeps us all very humble.
Yeah.
Can I ask, how do you get majority of your work? So you spoke a little bit about the content creator side, like getting things through like YouTube and TikTok, but your photography work, you've worked a lot. If you don't mind bringing up clients that I've seen you work with,
yeah,
like
for
sure. I can see that you've worked a lot with Red Bull. I'm guessing that's why you're at Silverstone as well.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah. That's fine. That wasn't like that TikTok where it's like, what's it like living my dream? That wasn't how I felt when I saw that story at all. So you have a few recurring clients, but how do you get clients in? Like, how have you found that? Word of mouth?
Yeah.
Pitching?
I actually haven't tried pitching.
Okay.
It's something I want to do. I have like a massive amount of respect for people that do it. I do want to try it. I think, why not shoot your shot and like go for those clients? I just don't even know where to start. But yeah, no, most of my work at this point is from like word of mouth. Some people find me on Instagram. A lot of my inquiries come through my website. How they find that website, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, a lot of it is word of mouth. So with Red Bull, I first worked for them, I wouldn't be able to give you an exact date, but a couple of years ago. And that came off the back of my work at Warehouse Project. They recommended me for a job for an event that Red Bull were throwing in Manchester. And from then on, I've just kind of worked with them on various different like activations, things like Silverstone, different festivals, and yeah, things kind of all around the country, I guess.
So I'm going to infer a little bit from what you've just said, networking. Is that important to your business?
I think so, but I think it's less about thinking about networking and more just about like, you go into a job, you do your job right. And like, if you're like, I don't know, if you're nice to people and you get on with people and you kind of build those relationships organically, I think is a better way of thinking of it than like building a relationship for the sole purpose of getting work. Because that kind of can feel a bit like inauthentic, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that a word? I think I just made that one up.
No, you didn't.
But...
I think that's actually a word. I think I made up a word earlier. I think you're fine.
Okay, good.
I think when people are like, you need to network. And I'm like, or you could just talk to people and just be nice and take an interest in them. And that could be also seen as networking.
Absolutely.
I think I know people, and you know what? I'm going to say that I've done this before. I've looked people up on LinkedIn before I've gone to events so that I can like see what they look like, so I know who to talk to.
Oh, that's quite clever though.
or stalkerish, whichever one you want to go with. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, you made the profile, so or like Instagram and stuff. So I've like known who I should be talking to. But again, I think it comes back to that pressure thing. Whereas times when I've like just been backstage and I'm like talking about how excited I am, they have like party rings. Or like there was an altercation where I was really excited they had the right oat milk, and the artist was really excited they had the right oat milk. If you understand oat milk, you know what I mean. I think that's created such much organic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree about the pressure thing. Like I've had situations where I've been like backstage, like talking to people, and then afterwards you find out who they are and you're like, oh, okay. And if I'd known who they were, I probably wouldn't have been as confident in speaking to them. So yeah, 100%. I agree. There's sometimes a pressure if you go into it looking for certain people, whereas if you just let it happen organically, it sometimes works out for the best.
Amazing. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about like the good, the bad, the ugly. Have you got any funny stories that you wouldn't mind sharing of like your career, or like anything that you're like, I would never do that again? Just a little bit like big sister word of advice.
Always that thing where like those red flags that you do have to listen to, because it's the clients that want like everything for nothing are going to be the ones that are more trouble down the line. It's every time a client tries to lowball you, they are more difficult than the clients that say yes to your rate straight away. It's honestly, I don't know what it is, but it's just like 9 out of 10 times that is, if they lowball you, they're going to be a difficult client.
Yeah, and I think specifically this year, which is if you're listening to this later, like in the future, it's 2024. I think everyone I've spoken to this year has had a hard year.
Yeah.
Like trying to get their rates paid, trying to get invoices paid on time, trying to like get booked, which is sad because like obviously we're all in this industry and we are all creative and we are all talented, and it's just, I don't know what it is about this year, but I'm like you even saying like you feel it too.
Absolutely. This year, I like the last couple of months, touch wood, have been pretty good for me, but I mean there have been months this year like May and January were probably the worst Mays and Januaries that I've ever had since I started my career. Like it's just, and you don't expect that as you grow in your career, you don't expect your work to get less and you don't expect it to get harder. But yeah, this year has definitely been the slowest year that I've had in certain months for sure.
And I think you've also pointed out like you have a reoccurring clients as well.
Yeah.
And there are still months where you're like, oh, okay, what do I like? I have to be inventive. I have to think on my feet. I have to pivot.
Absolutely. And some of the jobs that I've had like people message me for this year have been so like insultingly low. Like I had someone that wanted me to like travel. It was like, I don't even remember where it was, but it was like somewhere really far from like London. So I'm based in Manchester, but I always say like I'm based in London and Manchester because my mum lives here. I can stay at my mum's, or I can stay at my flat office here in Manchester. So usually like they're the two cities that I'm based in. This job was like, I think it was like Scarborough or something. So it was like not even near either one of those cities. And they wanted to pay me £50 for the whole set and including travel and portraits beforehand. And I was like, no. Like, I just was like, there's no, when you're talking to people like that as well, there's no way of even like getting them to, and this was not like an unsigned band either, by the way. This was like an actual band that was signed and like it was their label that had messaged me. And it was just, I just think like, who's saying yes to that? No. It's going to cost me more to get there.
Yeah, no, take that. People listening, take that word of wisdom there of not doing that. Yeah. Well, we are getting to the point where I think people will stop listening to our voices. So I would like to ask you what I'm going to ask every photographer or creative that's on my podcast is, can you discuss your last job with us?
Yes.
So what we kind of do here is you can give us a ballpark figure, because obviously sometimes in contracts you can't say this is an amount. You don't have to tell us who the client was if you don't want to, but can you break it down for us? So like if you can explain deliverables, turnaround, whatever you can talk, just so that like someone who is listening, if they've never worked with a corporate client before or whatever kind of job this was, they have a kind of understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, so my last job was a live music job, but it was for how do I talk about this without specifics? It was not for the artist.
Okay.
It wasn't for the venue, but it was similarly to shooting it for a venue. Okay. So it was a similar kind of thing. And yeah, so my brief was more to kind of show the wider context of the show. So the performance, the crowd, the try that one again. The demographic, the venue, like the kind of like whole contextual piece, not just the performance. And yeah, I was there for support and for the main act. And
how many hours would you say that was?
I reckon, I'm trying to think, 3 hours maybe.
Okay.
3, maybe a bit more.
Not awful.
No, I wasn't like contracted to set hours, so it's just kind of like you get there and like as long as you shoot what you need to shoot, like you're fine to like come whenever kind of thing. So maybe a bit more than 3 hours. And then what deliverables? It was all for, so usage wise, it was all web based, and
that's because you outline usage rights when you do your contract.
You got to know what if it's going on a billboard, it's going to cost different to if it's going on just the website or the socials or whatever.
See, different licensing people.
That's definitely important to kind of know when you're quoting for a job what that usage is. And also if that usage changes down the line, then don't be afraid to kind of reach back out and say, hey, this wasn't agreed, this is what you now owe me. But you can say it a bit more diplomatically than that if you want. But and what were the other questions?
So deliver, how long was your turnaround?
It wasn't in my contract, but I've worked with this client before, so my voice keeps breaking, sorry. Do
you want some water?
No, it's all right, it's okay. It wasn't in my contract, but I'd worked with this client before, so I think I delivered within like 2 days. Okay. I think. Yeah. Because I kind of knew that it wasn't live editing or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't for press or anything that needed to go out the next day. Because you'll know sometimes you have to get it like by the end of the night. So it was pretty slow in that sense. And what are the other questions?
How many deliverables was that?
So it was more like a shot list. So it wasn't like a set amount of photos. Yeah. It was more like as long as kind of the images show the crowd, the venue, the performer. I think that was it. It was just, I think it was basically those 3 things. Like as long as I had a mixture of things that showed those elements, then that was enough. It could be, if I wanted to send them 40 shots or if I wanted to send them 10, as long as it kind of covered that scope, it was fine. And I think I got paid $4.50 for that. Okay. So, yeah.
Not bad.
Not bad. Yeah.
Okay. Just I want to have the conversation so that I don't think people talk about like how they price up a job or like and like you've talked about like licensing there was something that I didn't even know existed.
No, absolutely. And I would also say like I charge differently between live music and commercial work. Okay. So with commercial work I charged an hourly rate or a day rate. Okay. Depending on the job. Whereas with live music I usually just do a set fee because it's a little bit different. You're not necessarily going to be working for that entire time in the same way as you would in a normal job, so in like a commercial job. So I do charge like a little bit differently. With live music it's usually just like a set fee for you want me to do this job, this is the fee. With portraits, other kind of commercial jobs, I'll say like this is my day rate or this is my hourly, and then we'll go from there. And usually my rates will include web and social usage, and then anything on top of that will be a quote based on what they need, basically.
I just have a very nerdy question. Just how do you give your deliverables to people? Is it WeTransfer? Is it Google Drive? Is it Dropbox?
Dropbox or WeTransfer, depending on who the client is and if I think they're gonna need it for longer, or if I'm gonna need it for longer, or if they've specified, then sometimes Google Drive.
I'm just always interested, like because you just have all these files. You're like, what do I do with them?
Yeah, no, I used to use WeTransfer all the time. But now I use Dropbox a lot more because it's a lot easier for me. Like, I don't have to send everything to my laptop, my phone. If I want to like post on Instagram, I can just go through and like, it's just easier to kind of see a catalogue of my work. But yeah, sometimes I still use WeTransfer, especially if it's like, so say you've done a job for, I don't know, you're shooting for a festival and then you've done like an extra set for someone else and you just send them like a link to their photos or something. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's where I would use WeTransfer a little bit more than Dropbox in that sense. Yeah.
Now we are going to finish up. So I would love, is there anything that you're working on at the moment that you want to talk about, or where people can find you?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok. My username on both of those, Sophia J. Carey.
I'll make sure to link them in the show notes as well. Don't worry. Yeah. And your YouTube.
And my YouTube is just Sophia Carey. Yeah, you can find me there. In terms of what I'm working on, just whatever I get asked to do. In terms of personal stuff, this year I've been making more of an effort to kind of focus on like editorial work, trying to build that portfolio. But yeah, I'm kind of always doing something. Don't know what it is, but something.
Yeah, we all have to be, don't we?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
I'm going to end it now.
Thank you so much.